Afternoon, everyone. Just opening up shop a few minutes early to give people a chance to log on. We'll get going promptly on the hour, but good to see some old friends joining. Nice to see you, Tom, Mr. Kerr. Thanks for the comment, Tom, but I think you probably know a lot more than me, but I'll take that from you with pleasure. Right, almost there on the hour, and we will get going promptly. These webinars have been an absolute pleasure to do. Started to do them during the pandemic, and they've just really caught on, and they've been a lot of fun to do. I've had a lot of fun preparing them and doing them. But anyway, look, so we are up and on the hour now. Hopefully everyone can see the screen okay, and let's get going. I'll just plow on as people are still joining. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Greg Jeffries. I own Visual Displays, which was formerly Paradigm. I'm a specialist consultant in the area of standards and the sorts of things we're talking about there. I'm not an AV consultant. I currently chair Avixa's Standards Steering Committee, and I was co-writer of the standards that we're going to talk about today. I'm heavily involved in standards. One of the current standards we've got that we're writing in Avixa, which I'm on the task group of, is this new user experience design for AV, which I'm really very excited about. And I think that's going to be a bit of a game changer in 2023. The background to a lot of what we're talking about today is driven by the move to hybrid working, and I'm going to focus around that a lot. I've been involved in the leadership of Avixa and in various capacities through the years, and this is and that's me. So please use the Q&A to lodge questions as we go along. I can be very respectful of people's time. We've got a hard stop in terms of the content at half past the hour. However, I'm aiming to stop a little bit before then to have time for Q&A, and then I will overrun. Sometimes these sessions really catch fire and we get loads of questions, and other times you are quite polite and subdued, so we'll just see how it goes, and really looking forward to sharing this new standard with you. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Avixa's new image system contrast ratio standard today. Now, this is actually has got a long provenance. Back in 2009, we started the PISCAR, which is the projected image system contrast ratio standard. I remember being at task group meetings and sessions at Stewart Film Screen's fancy cinema on Redondo Beach in California, and looking at test slides, and then the next standard that we were looking at was DV-DISCARD, direct view displays. However, it was decided we could get an all-in-one standard, so hence image systems contrast ratio, and then you track the clock back forwards by 10 years, and then we're out at Google in Mountain View campus in the Bay Area, further north in California. But there's a very distinguished group of people I was proud to be on this task group with, and there are some subtle changes to PISCAR, but really mostly in the applicability of it. Now, what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to really look at the standard from a Pro AV perspective, particularly in the work that I'm doing in hybrid workspaces, Teams rooms, of course, being the buzzword for all of that. And I'm going to try and set some kind of context and applicability for it. Like I say, please chuck any questions in the Q&A. I'll have to steam through fairly quickly to get through what we've got. And probably I won't deal with questions unless they're really apposite during the presentation, during the webinar, and then we will have time to do them at leisure, and hopefully in the correct depth as we go on. Right, so what we are talking about today is contrast, image contrast, and really contrast is the byword for image quality. There are a number of attributes that to go into what makes an image, a displayed image of whatever provenance it is, whether it's projection or flat panel or whatever. However, if you've got good contrast, you've basically got a good image quality. And so that's why we made the standard around this single attribute of image quality. And you know, this graphic makes that point, you know, in a graphic way. But the thing about contrast is that although one looks brighter than the other, they're both effectively the same brightness. However, low contrast images are perceived as both low quality and low resolution, and that's why it's an attribute that we really focus on. So image contrast comprises three elements. Firstly, there's the impact of ambient light, and how much and in what way does ambient light affect black levels. Secondly, there's the screen itself, the type or the technology that you have, and we'll look at that, projection screens and flat panels and so forth. And then finally, there's the actual display device. You know, whether it's a reflective screen material, or the transmissive type or emissive types of displays. You know, we're going to be looking at that in a bit more detail as we go through. So now the fact that contrast has got these three elements, and particularly when it comes to projection, it's a bit easier. Well, it's a lot easier, in fact, when you're just using flat panels. But the reason it's regarded as a bit of a no-go area, or it's quite difficult, is because it does break. You've got these permutations of these three elements. However, if you address these elements individually, it actually becomes very simple. The science and the calculations are very simple. I've got a bunch of spreadsheets that you can download off my website. But really, the point about it is that it confirms that the subject is the display. And in the case of projection, it's the projector screen and ambient light, so that you've got all three elements there. And the other thing about the PISCAR standard is it refers to the display because it refers to the system. That is to say, the whole system from source through to the actual displayed image. And the standard is really quite careful to pick up on that. in terms of Pro AV, in terms of modern workspaces, modern teaching spaces, the biggest factor that impacts the display is ambient light. Ambient light level impacts every kind of display type, but in different ways. It's a question of how much and in what way, not whether it does it. And as you can see, although people don't think of it in those terms, particularly with flat panel displays, the older generation of displays particularly tend to have shiny surfaces, and these can produce so-called veiling reflections where viewers can't see part of the image, and also even disability glare, where it's actually blinding depending on the reflection that's there. And that's typical of so-called specular reflection. So that is a reflection like a mirror, whereas projection screens have a more diffuse reflectivity characteristic, which we addressed in a different way. And there on the right of the image, you can see an example of an ambient light rejecting projector material, and then a sort of a standard white material under sort of high light conditions in a university teaching space. It's important to remember that contrast is a relative attribute. That is to say, it doesn't say how white the screen, how white the peak white is, or how black it is, but it identifies the difference between the two. Now, in modern meeting rooms and hybrid spaces, the displays are usually too bright, which is the cause of asthenopia, which is eye strain. And now that we are into this world of hybrid meetings and teaching and so forth, where people are going to be working in these spaces for extended periods of time, this actually becomes a really important thing to consider and to design out. I'm not going to talk about it in depth here. There'll be some backup materials that come out to you after the webinar. And of course, myself and my team are very glad to help all of our friends and colleagues with that. However, just to kind of hit on that, looking at a little bit of detail, the operative attribute here that we need to work with is the task luminance ratio, and that is to say that we calculate that the brightnesses, the luminances of everything within the room, whether it's your colleagues, a whiteboard, the paper in front of you, and the display, fall within a certain range. So what PISCAR does do is set the difference between the white and the black levels in order for you to have a good user experience, but it doesn't say where that is, and that falls outside the standard, and that's why I mention it here, because the thing with standards, I kind of consider standards to be like a 2.0 thing now. We're into a more mature use of standards, and I think that that for people on the call now, for users of Avixa standards now, I think it's really important that they're used critically. They're not sort of written in tablets of stone. They are living, breathing pieces of work which can be used critically and can be taken from critically. So that having that kind of flexibility of approach and being respectful of your own experiences and abilities is I think one of the keys to success in actually using standards in your day-to-day work. So we're going to look at the standard itself now in reasonable detail. We don't have time for a deep dive here, but having said that, I believe everything here on this webinar will give you completely ample understanding to be able to understand the standard and how to use it as well, and hopefully a few sort of tips and bits of knowledge along the way too. But as I say, please do chuck in your questions in the Q&A if you've got any particular things you would like me to cover or to loop back onto. So the drivers behind the producing these Avixa standards has been that they have been designed to be of practical use to AV professionals. These are not for people in white lab coats working in academia. They do not need expensive meters. We're going to look at meters on that. They're based on UX. They're based on the needs of viewers, and we've got 4 viewing categories that we're going to look at now. And it's about their performance standards. They measure that they're looking at the results. They don't tell you how to get there. And this standard is completely agnostic about the technology. It could be DvLED, it could be OLED, projection, whatever. It's agnostic. Everything is assessed on a like-for-like flat playing field. You'll find that there is there's a lot of great material in the back of the standard and with appendices and so forth. However, like all standards, there's just a core kernel of wisdom and useful stuff there, and useful material and metrics and so forth. But a lot of the wrappings around a standard are involved, if you like, justification for why the standard is there, supporting materials and so forth. Hopefully part of today's session will be to kind of show how easy and how easy it is to integrate these into your working life. So we're now going to look at the 4 viewing categories, viewing criteria that we have in the standard. The first one is passive viewing. Now, this is where the viewer can actually see what's on a screen, and that would be typically a very kind of low-level, simple PowerPoint. In practice, we just don't use that. That sets a bar that's too low for Pro AV, and particularly for hybrid viewing spaces and teaching. The really universally used category here is in basic decision making, and here it's where the viewer can make informed decisions on the basis of being able to engage with the displayed content. It's not about being able to see the tiny granular details within the content. It's about being able to read a document, look at a reasonably complex graph, and so forth. Then moving along, analytical decision making. Now, this is where viewers can make critical decisions based on the granular detail of the image. Now, this in practice means being able to see individual pixels in the image. And we'll look at a table with some examples of that. But having said that, the 2 categories on this page in Pro AV terms very rarely get used. I'm heavily involved in designing and producing very advanced display systems, but even then we don't use analytical decision making very much, because honestly, quite often in those situations, the viewers are self-selecting their viewing distance, so they might kind of move forward to look on a particular critical detail, and then look back to get the actual wider picture. Then the 4th category is full motion video. This was a surprise to us when we produced the standard, because we didn't think there would be a difference when we were doing the task group work between the analytical decision making but full motion video. But when you looked at the kind of the nuance, the shadowy details in movies when we watched them in proper quality, it was quite clear that there was a step above. Now, these are the contrast ratios that are required in all of these categories. So passive viewing needs 7:1, basic decision making 15:1, analytical is 50:1, and then full motion video takes a big step up again, up to 80:1. Now, I'm going to focus on the checkerboard contrast ratio here. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. You'll see that that the sequential contrast ratios hit higher numbers. I will go into that in more detail. And also more for the benefit of for you to have materials to follow up with after the webinar. I've copied out the tables which go into a bit more detail and examples of the viewing categories. But I think my basic explanation should be good enough for you. You know, and apart from anything else, then apart from anything else, really basic decision making will deal with 99% of any cases that anyone in Pro AV has to deal with. One thing that we have changed in the updated standard is that we had a partial conform. What you'll see in a moment is that when we measure, when we're taking measurements of displays, we take measurements in positions from all parts of the space, and in order to conform to the standard, the measurements have to be within conformance in all 5 positions. And even if one of those positions is outside that, then that's a failure to conform. Right, now let's look at the checkerboard and sequential. The reason that the checkerboard test is the most significant one for Pro AV, and between you and me, to be perfectly honest, in my daily work, I do not use the sequential one for reasons we'll go into at the moment. So this is the one to focus on, because we have this 16 tile checkerboard pattern, and we measure each spot on those, the center of each spot on that checkerboard, which is displayed on the test screen, because what we want to know in Pro AV is what performance we can get on the same screen at the same time. The fancy word for that is intra-frame, but I forget that term myself so often that this checkerboard pattern is the best way of describing it. Then the second test that we have is a sequential test in the standard. Now, this has been adopted, which was a new thing from the original PISCAR standard, because firstly, we are using other flat panel and emissive display technologies, and they do have much higher inherent contrast ratios. However, these can only be seen really in very controlled lighting conditions, because it's the kind of conditions where, you know, in a home cinema or something like that, where it's controlled. And in reality, in a video signal, the volume, the quantity of white within a video signal is actually quite small. And so this, if you like, speaks to the optimal performance of what a display can produce. That having that white window pattern up is really it really changes the whole characteristics of the way that it's measured. It puts light out into the room, which comes back. There are all sorts of ways that it can cross pollute or speak to that. One quite funny thing is that when we were when we had our extended one of our extended task group sessions at Google in Mountain View, what we did with the black pattern is that we gamed it so that there was a single white pixel on the screen. It didn't matter where it was. And what we discovered was that the display manufacturers, if we put through video black, they switched the backlight off. But if there was just one white pixel, they'd switch the backlight on, which was like gaming the system. So again, a reason to use these standards very critically. So the test equipment required for the standard is a luminance meter, a spot meter, a completed viewing area plan, which we'll look at in a moment, the test patterns, a measurement form, which we'll look at, and some sort of a measuring device. Now, I use the fancy meter of the type on the right. However, something like that Sekonic meter on the left, which just costs a couple of £100, and you can find them on eBay. You can use those because remember that that the contrast ratio is a relative, so it doesn't matter in fact that if a meter has a 5 or even a 10% error of judgment, because we're just looking for the difference in luminance levels between those squares. So what we do is that we measure 5 viewing locations: front left and right, rear left and right, and then a center, if you like, the sweet spot of the viewing. And there is the plan that we would fill out. This is the test report that we fill in, and should be included in the documentation. And we're recording, you know, when it comes to the using the checkerboard, we're taking the 16 data points for each of the 5 locations. So that really is the core of the standard. The point about using it is that you can use it to specify new systems more effectively because you know what you're shooting for. There are some useful appendices in the standard to kind of help you do that. But there are a number of webinars out there. Jonathan Braun, by the way, who led one of the co-leaders of the standard, his name was up there in lights at the front end of the webinar. There's a really great a webinar that you can look at on the Avixa site for those of you a member. Another reason for being a member, because apart from anything else, you get the standard for free. You can download it for free for an Avixa member. It really does show demonstrable expertise if you use the standard in the way that you specify displays. It's a great way of signing off systems without having any problems of subjectivity. You know exactly what to look at in measurement. It helps users and specifiers to produce better tenders. And if you're on the supply side, it really helps you to respond to tenders in a better way and in a more critical way. You can use it for system health checks to see what's there, and as a way to start the troubleshooting process. And again, for those people who are on the commercial side, on the supply side of things, it can be used to competitive advantage. I'm seeing a number of colleagues on the call who I know use standards, and that's a very welcome thing to me. And of course, it is free to Avixa members. So that kind of covers it on the standards. I'm just going to do a couple of words from our sponsor type slides now, and then we'll go into the Q&A. I'm running regular webinars now. Look on the website on the website here. I used to do them as 60 minutes. I'm now, since post-pandemic, 30 minutes seems plenty, and also respectful of people's times. And I look at the various things in various details. But again, if you've got any questions about it, either put them in the chat or the Q&A. Anything that we can't handle during our allotted time, I will take offline. I have as a result of the changes, particularly in hybrid working. In the past, I've always provided specialist consultancy, a large search engine company, a government departments and so forth. I've provided this, but really as a result of largely what's been required and driven by the move to hybrid working, I've now separated that out into a separate business from visual displays, and I provide these specialisms. And although end users are the people who normally approach me, in fact, the commercials are usually done through either the AV consultant or the integrator, because the whole point about what I do, it has to fit and be respectful and fit in smoothly to the existing ecosystem that's there. So that's kind of it that I wanted to cover in commercial terms. Visual displays, we cover all sorts of areas of displays expertise. We're best known for projection, particularly projection done properly. At the moment, a huge boom in an awareness of using ambient light rejecting screens, because that's the way that that you can hit the numbers that are there within the ISCR standard. It's actually quite hard to hit those numbers. It's very hard to hit those numbers under normal circumstances in projection, under normal lighting conditions, and that's, if you like, that's where, you know, my team and I hit in. Okay, so let's have a look at some of these questions. Someone has asked, in one of my LinkedIn posts, I referred to an expensive light meter. Yeah, can you share some cost-effective options that will perform an acceptable measurement? Okay, so in within my practice, there are two forms of light meters that that we use. One is an illuminance meter, which measures ambient light levels in lux. You can get one of those for 50 quid, 50 bucks, and they are fine for doing just general room illumination. Illumination. And honestly, I advise anyone to have one of those meters. Apart from else, it makes you look smarter than you are, and it's been that's the secret to my career. The other meter is a luminance meter, and I looked at those quickly during the presentation. I use an expensive handheld lab meter or sequence of meters for that, but as I say, you can get these spot meters that you can use for that. The accuracy is not as important as that I need for the rest of my work, as I say, because it's about the delta, the difference between the black and the white levels that are there. Just before I look at any other Q&A, we're coming to the end of the half hour. So thanks so much, everyone, for attending the webinar. We had a great turnout today, and please look out for the other webinars that I've got in for the rest of the autumn, and I shall be renewing renewing those in the winter program, I remember what visual displays and what I can offer you, but for the time being, I'm going to thank those who ducking out on the half hour, and I'll just carry on answering any questions that come up. So please do keep them coming. Right, let's have a look. In my personal setup, there looks to be a fair amount of light reflection. Is this on purpose, or is this an experience that would suggest a change in your setup based on this discussion? I have a really expensive setup here of two adjustable lights that I got off this store called Amazon that you might set up. I'm personally happy with the setup that I have. I quite like it. It looks authentic. I think the quality of it is okay. I personally don't like the fuzzed out backgrounds, but this is about this question, if you like, is about the source of the signal, and really the presentation that I've had today has been about the quality of the other end, at the receiving end of the signal. Right, do I have any more questions here? No, you are a really polite and restrained lot today, but it's been, yeah, I think that's it. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Great to see so many friends and colleagues, and also a whole lot of new faces. Please look out for my future webinars. There's, I think, another couple before Christmas. I should know, but this is me on a good day, unfortunately. Yeah, I really hope to see you there. and I hope that was helpful to you. But do remember, Avixa has a whole swathe of standards that apply across the board. And as a kind of a general principle, it's really important to realize how usable the standards are. And once you get into the use of them, it really becomes second nature. And there are a whole lot of calculators that are available through Avixa, through myself and my website. And I hope that kind of, for those of you who haven't looked at the standard before, I hope that kind of opens the topic out to you. But it's a subject of great interest and passion to me, as I hope you can pick up. And many of you might be connected to me on LinkedIn or connect to me. I'm always happy to get questions and to talk about these things that interest me. So again, thanks so much for participating today. Hope to see you on the next webinar, and thanks again.